She slammed the door so hard the picture frames rattled. "You're just a guest here," she shouted, her voice slicing through the quiet like a knife.
I stood there in my slippers, hands trembling, staring at the door she just slammed in my face. A guest in the house where I once rocked her to sleep. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her, that the years of kindness and sacrifice had made me soft, deaf to cruelty. But I hadn't. She meant every word. The walls seemed to breathe around me, old wood groaning under the weight of silence. I could still smell the cornbread cooling in the oven, the one I'd baked, 'cause it used to be her favorite. She used to run in from school asking, "Mama, is it ready yet?" Now she called me a guest. I turned slowly toward the hallway mirror and caught my reflection. Same face, older eyes. There was flour on my cheek. My apron looked out of place in this modern kitchen full of chrome and glass. I whispered to myself, so that's what I've become. Outside, Texas sunlight poured through the blinds, warm and cruel at the same time. I stood still for a long minute until the sting behind my eyes finally settled into something steadier. Not anger, not even heartbreak, just a quiet knowing that something had broken for good. It hadn't started that day. No, this kind of betrayal never happens overnight. It begins in small ways, tiny fractures in the bond between mother and daughter, a tone, a sigh, a joke that cuts too deep. You tell yourself it's stress, it's work, it's the world making her hard. But one day, you realize she's not coming back from wherever she went. And the truth is, I saw it coming long before she ever shouted those words. It started months before that day, maybe even years, but I didn't want to see it. Love makes you blind, and motherhood makes you deaf to warnings. After my husband, Thomas, passed away, the house felt like a hollow shell. Every creak in the floorboards reminded me of his boots. Every quiet night reminded me of how he used to hum in his sleep. The silence got so heavy that even my heartbeat sounded too loud. My daughter Melissa was all I had left. She called one evening and said, "Mama, why don't you come stay with us? You shouldn't be alone." I hesitated. The house in Houston had been mine and Thomas's pride. We bought it when interest rates were sky high, but we worked every weekend repainting, fixing, building, saving. Every inch of that home was touched by our hands. Every corner smelled of our history. But loneliness wears you down, and Melissa's voice on the phone sounded sweet, almost tender. "Come on, Mama," she said. "You'll have your own room. You'll finally get some company." So I packed my memories into boxes, the wedding china, the photo albums, the crochet blankets, and moved into her big 2-story house just outside Dallas. It was one of those new developments with wide driveways and mailboxes that all looked the same. It felt too clean, too polished, like no one had really lived there. At first it was nice. Melissa introduced me to her neighbors. Her husband Daniel carried my boxes upstairs, and they both said, "We're so glad you're here." I believed him. I made dinner the first week, chicken and dumplings like she used to love. We sat together, and for a moment I thought maybe this would heal something inside me. But the warmth didn't last. It started with little things. Melissa rearranged my drawers. "You don't need all this clutter, Mama," she'd say, tossing out my old dish towels. Then she started making rules. "Try not to cook after 8. Daniel likes quiet in the evenings. Don't leave your shoes near the door. It doesn't match the decor. Please don't hang laundry outside. It looks messy." I swallowed every word, every tone, and told myself she was just being modern. That's what daughters do when they have their own homes, right? They build their own order. I told myself I was lucky she even wanted me there. But sometimes, late at night, when I heard them whispering in their room, I caught my name, always followed by sighs. She means well, Daniel once said, but she doesn't fit in here anymore. That sentence sat heavy in my chest for weeks.
I tried harder after that night. I cooked less, cleaned more, and stayed mostly in my room. I didn't want to be the reason my daughters sighed behind closed doors. Every morning I woke up early to sweep the porch before the neighbors were even up. I watered the plant she never touched. I folded laundry she forgot in the dryer. One evening, Melissa came home from work, heels clicking against the towel. "You didn't need to make dinner," she said when she saw the table set. "We already ate out." Her voice was flat, not cruel, just cold enough to sting. "Oh," I said softly, I thought you'd be hungry." Daniel looked up from his phone and gave a polite half smile. "Thanks anyway, Miss Evelyn." Miss Evelyn. Not Mom, not even mother-in-law. Miss Evelyn. I smiled back, pretending it didn't hurt, but the words stayed in my ears long after they went upstairs. That night I sat in the dark kitchen with my untouched casserole and whispered to myself, maybe this is just how things are now. Still, a mother doesn't stop trying. I baked cookies for Melissa's office party, the same sugar cookies she used to decorate with pink frosting as a girl. When she came home, I told her they were in the kitchen. She barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, that's sweet," she said. "But we ordered from a bakery. Maybe Daniel will eat them." Daniel didn't. The next weekend, she hosted a dinner for her friends, lawyers and real estate agents, people who spoke fast and laughed even faster. I offered to help, but she waved me off. "Just relax, Mama. Don't worry about it." So I stayed quiet, standing near the kitchen doorway, smiling when someone noticed me. When I brought out a tray of biscuits, one of the women said, "Oh, you must be the housekeeper." Melissa didn't correct her. She just laughed, light and easy, and said, "She likes to keep busy." That laughter, it cut deeper than any insult could. I stood there holding the tray, my heart sinking, my hands trembling just a little, but I didn't let it show. I just nodded, placed the biscuits down, and walked back into the kitchen. I stayed there till the voices faded and the dishes piled up. When everyone left, I cleaned till the counters shined like glass. Then I sat down at the empty table, staring at the spotless surface, and said to no one, "You raised her better than this, Evelyn." But maybe I hadn't. The next morning felt heavy, like the house itself knew something had shifted. Melissa didn't come down for breakfast. Daniel gave a quick nod before heading out the door, coffee in hand. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair that used to be hers. When she finally came downstairs, it was almost noon. She looked perfect, of course, with her pressed blouse and polished nails. "Morning, Mama," she said, voice too light, like nothing had happened. "Morning, sweetheart," I replied, forcing a smile. She poured herself a cup of coffee, then leaned against the counter. "Listen, about last night," she began. For a moment, my heart lifted. I thought maybe she'd apologize. Maybe she'd say she didn't mean it. But then she continued. "You really don't need to get involved when I have people over. It's just awkward, you know? You standing around like that." I blinked slowly. "Awkward?" "Yeah," she said, brushing invisible lint off her sleeve. "You hovering. It makes people uncomfortable. They don't know what to say to you." I sat there quietly, my fingers wrapped around a cooling cup of tea. "I didn't mean to make anyone uncomfortable," I said. She sighed. I know you didn't, Mama. It's just, times are different now. You have to understand that. I nodded because I didn't trust my voice. That afternoon, I went out into the backyard, the only place in that house that still felt like mine. The Texas sun was strong, the kind that warms your skin but makes your eyes sting. I knelt by the little patch of soil where I planted mint and lavender. Melissa once told me it looked messy. I didn't care. The smell reminded me of home, of peace. As I worked, I heard the sliding door open behind me. Melissa's voice floated out. You really don't need to plant more stuff, Mama. It's not your yard. Something in me froze. Not my yard. I looked down at my hands covered in dirt and thought of the years those same hands have built, cleaned, cooked, held, comforted. When I turned around, she was already walking back inside. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the air conditioner. Her words echoed over and over. Not your yard. Not your space. Not your home. It was then I realized I wasn't living with my daughter. I was existing in her house. And there's a big difference between the two.
The days that followed blurred together. I moved around the house like a shadow, careful not to make noise, careful not to leave a trace. I made myself small, invisible, like a guest who overstayed her welcome. Melissa and Daniel began eating dinner later and later, sometimes not at all when I cooked. I'd hear their laughter from upstairs while I ate alone in the kitchen, my plate balanced on my lap, the sound of the television muffled through the ceiling. I started walking every evening, just to escape the walls that no longer felt like home. I'd walk past the same neat lawns, the same mailboxes, all identical, all lifeless. Sometimes an elderly couple would nod politely from their porch. Sometimes I'd smile back just to remind myself I still could. One afternoon, I came home to find Melissa sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread out in front of her. "What's all this?" I asked. "Nothing, just bills," she said quickly, flipping one over. "Go rest, Mama." Her tone was sharp, a warning dressed as concern. I let it go. But that night, curiosity kept me awake. The next morning, when she left for work, I glanced at the papers she'd left behind. They weren't bills. They were mortgage documents, refinancing applications. My name was on them. My heart dropped. When she came home, I tried to keep my voice calm. "Melissa, honey, why is my name on these?" She froze, just for a second. "Oh, that," she said with a laugh too light to be real. "It's just for paperwork, Mama. It helps with the tax rate if we list you as co-owner." "Co-owner," I repeated slowly. "But the deed's already mine. Your father and I—" "Mama," she interrupted, her patience thinning. "I know, but this is different. It's just paperwork. You don't need to worry about it." But I did. Deep down, something felt off. That night, I opened the small tin box I kept hidden in my drawer. Inside were my most precious papers, our marriage certificate, Thomas's death certificate, and the original deed to our house in Houston. I ran my fingers over the edges, yellowed and soft with age. That house had been our life's work, our story carved into brick and wood. And even though Melissa didn't know it, it still belonged to me. The next morning, she walked into my room without knocking. "You've been through those papers, haven't you?" she said, her eyes narrow. "I just wanted to understand." "You don't need to understand. You just need to trust me." Her words felt like ice. For the first time, I saw her clearly, not as my little girl, but as someone who had stopped seeing me as her mother a long time ago. That night, I sat at the edge of my bed with the tin box on my lap, my fingers tracing the corners like it was a heartbeat I could still feel.
I was not angry, not yet. I was just numb. You never think your own child would look at your life's work and see opportunity instead of legacy. I thought about Thomas. What would he have said if he saw this? He would probably shake his head and say, Evie, you are too soft. You keep giving until you have nothing left. He was right. I had given my daughter everything. The roof over her head, the hands that built it, the heart that forgave her too many times to count. The next morning, I decided to visit an old friend, someone I had not seen in years. Harold, our neighbor from Houston. He was a retired banker who used to help Thomas with finances. I brought the papers with me, just in case. Harold adjusted his glasses and studied the documents. Evelyn, he said slowly, your name is still the only one listed on the title. Whatever she is doing, she cannot touch this house without your signature. I felt both relief and sorrow. As she tried to add herself, I whispered. He nodded. She can try all she wants, but unless you sign, she has got nothing. Driving back, I thought about that word, nothing. My daughter thought she had all the power because I stayed quiet, because I chose peace over confrontation. But silence does not mean surrender. Sometimes it's the sound you make while sharpening your resolve. When I got home, Melissa was waiting in the kitchen. Her arms were crossed, her expression tight. Where were you? I went to see Harold. She face changed. Why? I wanted to understand what you've been doing with my house. I said softly, Mama, you are being dramatic. You don't understand how things work anymore. You're old-fashioned. You are slowing us down. Slowing you down? I repeated. You mean living in the home I paid for? Her tone hardened. You're lucky we even let you stay here. That sentence cracked something inside me. I had spent my whole life protecting her, feeding her, saving her from storms, and now she spoke to me like I was charity. For the first time, I did not look away. I met her eyes and said quietly, Melissa, this may be your house, but don't forget who taught you to build one. She rolled her eyes and walked off, muttering under her breath. But I stayed there, hand steady, heart still, because I finally knew what I had to do. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The sky outside my window was pale and still, the kind of quiet that only comes before something changes. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the steam rising from the cup. It smelled like mint, the one thing that always reminded me of home. Melissa and Daniel were still asleep upstairs. Their laughter from the night before still echoed in my mind. She had friends over again, and I stayed in my room like a ghost, pretending not to hear the jokes, the clinking glasses, the music. But I did hear. I heard her say she has nowhere else to go. What is she going to do, move back to that old place? And everyone laughed. She did not know how wrong she was. When the sun finally came up, I took out the tin box again. Inside were the keys to my old house in Houston. I had never told her I kept a copy. She thought I rented it out years ago, but the last tenants had moved out months earlier. I had been paying the property tax quietly out of what little savings I had left. I placed the keys beside my tea and watched the light hit them. They sparkled like a promise. Later that morning, I went into the living room. Melissa was on the couch, scrolling through her phone, coffee in hand. Daniel sat beside her, half listening, half pretending. I stood there for a moment before I spoke. Melissa, I need to talk to you. She sighed. Mama, can it wait? We are busy. No, it cannot. She lowered her phone just enough to glance at me. What is it now? I walked closer and looked her in the eye. I want you to know that I am leaving. Her expression flickered, confusion turning into something colder. Leaving? What do you mean, leaving? I mean, I'm moving out. I am going home. She laughed, a sharp sound that did not belong to the daughter I raised. Home? That house is falling apart, Mama. You cannot live there. I smiled softly. It is still standing, and it is still mine. For the first time in a long time, she had nothing to say. Daniel looked up from his phone, unsure whether to speak. Melissa finally said, "You are making a mistake. You will not last a week alone." Maybe, but I'd rather be alone in my own home than feel unwanted in someone else's. I turned and walked back to my room. I started folding my clothes one by one, steady and slow. With each fold, I felt lighter, like I was packing away every moment of humiliation and hurt she had ever handed me. That night, I placed the packed suitcase by the door. Tomorrow, I would go back to the house Thomas and I built with love, sweat, and dreams. And for the first time in years, I felt free.
The morning I left, the sky was painted with soft pink clouds. The Texas air smelled of dew and dust, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the kind of calm that sits deep in your bones. I moved quietly through the house, careful not to wake them. My suitcase rolled softly behind me, its little wheels humming against the tile floor. When I reached the kitchen, I stopped for a moment. The counters were spotless, the same ones I had scrubbed 1,000 times. My apron still hung on the hook by the pantry door. I touched it gently, then let it fall back into place. On the table, I left a note. Only a few words. I am going home. Take care of yourselves. No guilt, no begging, just truth. As I stepped outside, the sun was just rising, spilling gold across the neighborhood. I stood there for a second, breathing it in. Behind me, the house loomed tall and cold. It was beautiful from the outside, but it had never felt less like home. I called a cab and watched it pull up to the curb. The driver, a young man with kind eyes, smiled at me through the window. "Morning, ma'am. Heading far?" "Just heading home," I said softly. He helped me with my bag, and as we drove off, I looked out the window. The houses passed by like pages from a book I was done reading. It was a 3-hour drive back to Houston. I watched the open fields roll by, the sunlight flickering through the trees. Somewhere between the miles, the pain began to loosen. I thought of Thomas, of his voice saying, "We built this place for us, Evie. Always keep it safe." I had, even if I forgot to remind myself of it. When the cab turned onto my old street, my heart thudded. The house stood just as I remembered it. The white paint was a little faded, the shutters a bit crooked, but it still looked alive. I paid the driver, walked up the path, and unlocked the door. The smell hit me first, old wood, dust, and something faintly sweet, like time itself had been waiting for me. I stepped inside, and the floor creaked softly beneath my feet. Sunlight poured through the windows, catching the dust in little golden swirls. I ran my hand along the wall, the same spot where Thomas once penciled Melissa's height marks as she grew. Each line still there, faint but proud. I set my bag down and whispered, "I am home." For the first time in years, the silence felt kind. I spent the rest of the day cleaning, humming old songs, opening windows. The house breathed again, like it had been holding its breath all this time. And somewhere in that quiet rhythm, I found myself smiling. That night, I slept in my own bed, wrapped in the same quilt I had sewn decades ago. The wind moved softly through the open curtains.
I closed my eyes and dreamed of nothing at all, because peace does not need a dream. It just needs space to exist.
The following morning, I woke up to the sound of birds outside the window. The sun was warm on my face, and for a few seconds, I forgot everything. It felt like the world had turned back time, like Thomas was in the garden and Melissa was still my little girl running barefoot through the grass. I got up slowly, made myself coffee, and stood by the window looking out at the yard. The old oak tree was still there, bigger now, its branches reaching out like arms welcoming me back. The garden was wild, but alive. Lavender, mint, and wildflowers tangled together, just how I liked it. As I watched, something deep in my chest softened. I realized I was no longer scared of being alone. The loneliness I had feared all these years had been replaced with peace. This house did not judge me. It did not ask me to leave. It did not remind me that I was old or unwanted. It just stood there, steady and mine. I spent the next few days restoring what I could. I wiped down the furniture, polished the banister, and aired out every room. I even fixed the squeaky hinge on the front door with a little oil Thomas had left behind in the shed. Each small repair felt like a conversation with him. I could almost hear his voice saying, "You still got it, Evie." On the fourth day, I called Walter, our old attorney, the one who handled the property years ago. He still remembered my voice. "Evelyn, it has been a long time. What can I do for you?" I told him everything. The fights, the papers, the words Melissa had said, the fear that she would try to take what was mine. He was silent for a while, then said, "You did the right thing coming back. Do you still have the deed?" "I do," I said, tapping the folder on the table beside me. "Then you have nothing to worry about. But if you won't, we can make sure it stays that way." "What do you mean?" "There are ways to protect yourself. You can move the title into a living trust. That way no one can touch it while you are alive. And when the time comes, it will go exactly where you decide." I sat back in my chair and let that sink in. "I would like that," I said. "Good," he replied. "Come by my office tomorrow and we will take care of it." When I hung up, I looked around the house and felt something I had not felt in years. Control. This was mine. My walls, my floor, my name. That evening, I walked into the garden, knelt by the rosemary bush, and whispered, "You tried to make me forget who I was, Melissa, but I remember now." The wind stirred, gentle and cool, and I took it as a sign that the world had finally started to turn in my favor. The next day, I put on my best dress, the one with tiny blue flowers that Thomas always said made my eyes look brighter. I brushed my hair, slipped on my old pearl earrings, and looked in the mirror. For the first time in years, the woman staring back did not look tired. She looked certain. Walter's office was small but warm, tucked between a bakery and a florist. The scent of bread and fresh roses drifted in from the street as I walked in. He greeted me with the same kindness he had when Thomas was alive, offered me coffee, and pulled out a folder. "All right, Evelyn," he said, adjusting his glasses. "We will set up the trust under your name. It will make sure no one, not even family, can make a move without your approval." I nodded. "I just want peace, Walter. That is all." He smiled gently. "Peace is good, but security gives peace a place to live." It took about an hour,
I signed every page carefully, my hands steady. When he handed me the final document, stamped and sealed, I felt a weight lift off me. This house, this history was protected now. It was more than property. It was proof that I had lived, that my love had built something that could not be taken by greed or cruelty. As I left the office, I stopped by the florist and bought a single white rose. It was Thomas's favorite. On the way home, I rolled down the window, letting the wind rush through the car, the sun warm on my face. It felt like freedom. That night, I brewed myself a cup of mint tea and sat on the porch. The air smelled of summer rain and earth. Somewhere in the distance, I heard kids laughing, a sound that once filled my own yard. I smiled at the memory. Then my phone rang. I did not recognize the number at first, but when I answered, I knew the voice immediately. "Mama," she said, her tone hesitant, fragile. "Melissa," I replied. There was silence for a moment. Then she spoke softly. "I came by the house today. It is empty. Why did you leave like that?" I took a slow breath. "Because it was time." She did not respond right away. Then she said, "Mama, I was angry. I did not mean what I said. Angry is fine, but cruel is not." Her voice cracked a little on the other end. I was scared. I thought you would have nowhere to go." I smiled to myself. "You forgot who taught you to stand on your own feet? You forgot who built the ground beneath them." She sniffled softly on the other end. "Can I come see you?" I hesitated, my heart torn between love and memory. "Not yet," I said. "Maybe one day, but not yet." When I hung up, the phone felt heavy in my hand. I set it down beside my cup and watched the moon rise above the trees. The silence that followed was not empty anymore. It was full of peace, the kind that grows when you stop waiting for apologies that never come. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "You were right, Thomas. You said she would learn one day. I just never thought she would learn this way." The night breeze brushed my cheek, almost like a nod. I smiled, took another sip of tea, and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I was not someone's guest. I was home. A few days passed without another call. I filled the quiet with small things that felt like medicine. I polished Thomas's old toolbox and put it back on his shelf. I washed the curtains and let them dry on the line so they smelled like sunlight. I baked a skillet cornbread and shared a slice with the mailman who always waves from the truck. The house started to sound like itself again. Floorboards sighed, pipes hummed. The old clock in the hallway kept honest time. On Sunday afternoon, I walked to the cemetery with the white rose from Walter's office. The sky was bright and high, Texas blue, with just a few clouds like chalk smudges. I stood by Thomas's stone and laid the rose down. I told him everything. I told him about the trust and the quiet and the mint on the porch. I told him I was learning to sit still without feeling like silence was punishment. The wind lifted the edge of my scarf and I felt a simple comfort, like a hand on my shoulder. I said thank you and walked home slow. When I reached the porch, there was a note tucked under the mat, my name in her handwriting. I held the paper for a while before I opened it. It was short. "Mama, I am sorry. I was wrong. I will respect your choice. If you ever want to see me, I will come alone." There was a phone number written underneath, even though I already had it. I sat on the porch steps and let the sun warm my knees. I thought about the girl who used to chase butterflies in this yard, the girl who cried when she lost a ribbon, the young woman who hugged me too tight on her wedding day. I thought about the woman who told me I was a guest. Both of my daughter, only one can come inside my door. That evening, I brewed mint tea and set 2 cups on the porch table, one for me and one for the memory of everybody I have loved and lost. The tea steamed like a little prayer. I did not feel angry. I did not feel victorious. I felt steady. I called Walter the next morning and asked for one more appointment. We sat together and he wrote as I spoke. I told him how I wanted the house to pass when I'm gone. I named a women's shelter in Houston that helps mothers start over. I asked him to include a letter to be given with the keys that says this home once held a love that refused to break. He looked up with kind eyes and said, "That is a good legacy." On my way back, I stopped at the hardware store and bought seed packets. Lavender, mint, rosemary, sunflowers. I planted them in neat rows and watered the soil until it turned the color coffee. The air smelled like rain, though the sky was clear. I whispered, "Grow." At dusk, my phone buzzed, a message from Melissa. No excuses this time, no defense, only 6 words. "I am ready to listen, Mama." I looked at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back, "I am ready to be heard." I set the phone down without waiting for bubbles to appear. I lit the porch light and left it glowing over the steps, not as an invitation, as a boundary that shines. If she comes, she will come with respect. If she stays away, I will still have peace. Either way, I am no one's guest. The crickets started up in the grass. A train called from far off. The house settled around me with that familiar evening creak. I sipped my tea and watched the sky turn the color of plums. The first stars came out, quiet and sure. I thought about all the women who sit in kitchens and keep their pain to themselves, who fold laundry with a lump in their throat, who stand in doorways and wonder when they disappeared. I wanted to speak to them. If you are listening, you are not invisible. You are not a burden. You are not a guest in your own life. You are the one who laid the first brick and planted the first seed. You are allowed to be proud. You are allowed to be safe. You are allowed to lock the door and open it only for love. Night gathered softly. I picked up my cup and breathed in the mint. Somewhere a child laughed. Somewhere a mother closed the curtain and finally let herself rest. I leaned back in my chair and smiled into the dark. This is my house. This is my name. This is my voice. And it is not leaving again.